Hi everyone, it's Elizabeth here. So I wanted to do this video in regards to things that I've learned about money during my spiritual journeying. So now that I'm 35, I think probably at the age of 20 was when I really started kind of the spiritual transformation, or at least being on a path of spiritual personal growth, when I studied abroad in Australia in 2005. I landed there on my birthday at the age of 20, and I was just really, curious to discover myself and the world. And I know, coming from the Midwest, where people don't really earn like a ton of money, at least back then, there was all these questions that were going on in life. When I studied yoga in 2007, I think a lot of that conversation or thought process with money started to come out because that book, The Secret, came out, and everybody just wanted to, manifest a bunch of abundance. And so how or why I thought about this topic is because I woke up this morning and I just went on Facebook, and like every 2 or 3 posts was a sponsored ad. And a lot of it was like, unlock the secrets to abundance, or you can live as a Renaissance woman and make 6 figures off of your passions, and how to live off your passion projects. And the next one was like, blogging isn't the secret anymore. Find out money, or find out how to make money and get rid of your 9-to-5 job. And so I've been really analyzing and thinking about this for a long time, because the spiritual community, at least some of my spiritual friends, have definitely like tongue slashed me through the years, because I have a logical view on money. I do think that money and abundance is a logical and a spiritual issue. And if any of you guys are the woo-woo ones out there, like my moon sign is in Virgo, and so I naturally have a more skeptical mindset with certain things. And Virgos are kind of like the logical ones of the zodiac, and well, earth signs in general are, but they're also like the accountants of the zodiac. So to some degree, you have to balance logic and spirit. And so I just wanted to talk about kind of 10 or 11 points of things that I've learned over the last 15 years. And I think a lot of this is important because people are struggling financially right now. And I think there's a lot of bullshit being sold to us, to be honest. And when these successful things don't work, or you don't manifest money off of your art or your self-published book, you kind of get depressed from it. And that's what happened to me. When I published my book, Finding Home, I didn't think that I would ever live off of it, but I thought that I would get some form of royalty or money coming in. Nobody publishes anything and just, assumes that they're only going to sell like 100 copies of the book. So I think there's a lot of really bad advice out there. So I will just kind of go down the list and start to talk about things that I've learned over the last 15 years from my spiritual journeying. So the first thing is, I do think astrology and your soul's karmic path does play a role. A lot of Christians don't believe in this stuff, and I do think astrology can be used just like anything else, where you can be so root and locked into that system to where it messes you up. But I know that throughout my time of analyzing people and knowing their zodiac signs, I have understood different relationships that people have had with money. Sagittarians blow their money like crazy. Like my ex-husband, even as a kid, he told me he would go mow the lawn and get $10. His brother used to save the $10, and he would get the $10 and then buy pizza for the family. So Sagittarians are generally very generous. And they blow money, which is kind of opposite of other zodiac signs. Like Pisces can definitely be like hoarders, especially if they're operating on the dark side. Your karmics, if you do believe in like reincarnation in your soul's karmic path, you may have been a regal person or a rich person or a poor person in a past former life. And you have these lessons that you have to come through. So someone who could have been really rich in their past life could be born poor this life, or maybe if you were homeless in a former life, like these are some karmic energies that you have to kind of work through to build a better relationship with money. Is money the root of all evil? That was something that I questioned, And when I was younger, I had a lot of back pain, especially in my lumbar spine. And I was always constantly worried about money, 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 make money. Like it was just rooted from my poor immigrant grandmother and great grandmother to go to college, get a job, and save money because they survived World War II and they saw what life was like being poor. And so you kind of build this obsession around money, um, to where when I was younger, with being kind of more like that liberal vegan hippie bohemian chick, I kind of saw money as being evil. And what I came to learn from that is that money is not always evil. People, this kind of ties into the third point about money being energy and power. Money is energy. It's like anything else on this planet. You know, you eat food, that's energy. You turn on your lights, that's energy. The wood that builds the cabin and the meadow is energy. So what you do with that money dictates if it's evil or not. So a lot of people gain money and they also gain power because they're in higher positions or they get sucked into, negative influences that use money to either corrupt people or to enslave people. Now, there's spiritual leaders who are probably making bank, like someone like Amma, and they're hopefully using money for the better. Money can be used in positive ways to build orphanages or to donate money to nonprofits. Money can be used for good or evil. And the Bible talks a lot about money kind of being the root of all evil, but I think it's more or less on how you choose to use that money. Using that money to help your friends or your neighbors, or there's a donation fund where people are now doing like COVID-19 relief funds. That is a very positive use of money to help people who are in need at that specific time. I do think depending on where you come from and how you were raised, you do have to somehow erase the negative cellular memories that you have about money. So if you were raised poor, you probably will have a poor person's mindset, or what they call the scarcity mindset. That is something that you do have to work around, quote unquote, fixing that. But I think it's a really complicated issue. I'm so sick of the spiritual community or my spiritual friends who are not like the Christian ones, but more into the energy and the co-creation and just constantly putting the guilt, shame, and blame on the person. I think to some degree, everybody has a little bit of a negative attachment to money because it comes and goes so easily, or it's really difficult to earn. I think when you live in a really great life, like if you're the part of the 1% and you have this beautiful home, you live in a nice community where there's no crime, you're making bank, or you are earning a bunch of royalties off the internet because you have an online business. It is so much easier to be positive when you have that coming in versus the other end of the spectrum, when it's like you're maybe a school teacher or you're a social worker and you're doing really great things for the community, but you're just not compensated for it like the other people, like the tech people. But I do think we have the control to change our relationship and our thoughts and feelings about money, that you do deserve a good and healthy, abundant life, but you have to take some form of self-responsibility for that. The next thing I learned is that society is obsessed with money. My God, I just think it doesn't even matter if you're spiritual or logical. Like, this is the system that we live in. But even what I saw on Facebook this morning, it is just such a fucking obsession on money. And it's like we're losing the purpose of helping others or having a relationship with God and things like that. And I think the thing is, so many people want to be making bank, earning a ton of money, and nobody wants to change their own lifestyle or live within their means. Coming from Ohio, I kind of think that earning over $50,000 is a great life. There's a lot of people who would think that earning $55 or $60,000 is a horrible, miserable life. But the thing is, if you compare the two individuals' lifestyles, like, I don't crave $1 million home or a fancy car. Like, that might be the Aquarian in me, which is a lot of what you see today with like minimalism, or just kind of like I don't need a ton, I just need something. Like, I don't mind cooking my own food and having that control of what goes in my mouth. Um, but the obsession is like we're just losing the authenticity of the human experience. And that's something that I learned in India, is that people didn't help you based on being genuine. They helped you because if they told you where the train station was or how to get from point A to point B, they kind of wanted to get tipped. They wanted some money. And I can't blame them, because they live in a society of seven or, tons of billions of people, that most of their population is living on the streets. And when you see people living in like a little shanty town on the side of the road in a loincloth, like, that's going to make you not want to live that type of lifestyle. The next thing that I learned is that abundance doesn't necessarily mean that it's a paycheck. This is the one thing that I learned from my great grandmother. I actually, after she and my uncle passed, there was a lot of deaths that happened in 2012 that kind of, trickled into 2013 in my family, or just with people that I knew. And so at that time, I was into psychics, and I did see a psychic, and she supposedly did like channel, or got channeling from my great grandmother. But the message was, whether you think this is true or absolute BS, the message was that my great grandmother wanted me to know that her life was abundant, but it did not mean monetary abundance. She was abundant in love and family. And I thought that was a very special thing. So regardless of whether you think that psychics are bullshit, or whether you think, that they have some validity in this world, I actually thought that was a very important message, because that made me step back and realize that all this gravitating toward money and earning, money off my passion projects, like, that really didn't mean a whole lot. And I noticed a lot of that after I got divorced, that I was just so focused on money, and I wasn't focused on my marriage or my husband at certain points of life. And that is one mistake that I don't want to redo in my future. So just realize that abundance, maybe you're not like the most rich person in your community or whatever, but, maybe you are more set up, because a lot of people who are very rich and abundant, they're also very lonely, or they lead very lonely lives because they get caught up in things like nightclubbing or drugs or promiscuous sex. There's nothing that's fulfilling them. Money can get you out of bad situations, and it can, get you through tough times, like what we're seeing with coronavirus. So if you have a savings account, or you have money in a retirement account, you are very much set up for a better future than those who are living paycheck to paycheck. This is another point that the spiritual community has like tongue lashed me for, saying, Elizabeth, you're not being, you're not in an abundant mindset. And the next point is that not everything about money is spiritual. It's not. The earth plane operates in logic. It's not always logical, but this is where self-accountability and responsibility takes place. If you live within or below your means, or even a little bit below your means, because a lot of times people who live, like if you're making $300,000 a year, you might be more apt to buying that $1 million home rather than just that cute, modest house that costs like $200,000. So you do need to be logical and care for your own needs, and get rid of things that you don't need. Like, maybe you don't need cable. Maybe you don't need a cell phone and a landline. Maybe you can choose one or the other. Maybe you don't need the expensive car. Maybe you're not buying, like the really $9 pasta sauce. Maybe you're still choosing an organic brand, but the one that's like $4. Those are certain things that are within your control. and having a budget, or at least looking at your expenditures and analyzing it. Or maybe you're eating out 7 days a week and you're blowing $200 a week in eating out. You know what? If you cooked your food and went to the grocery store, you could probably cut that budget by 50%. We live in a consumeristic society. Like when I was younger in college, I used to buy things just because it was $1 or $5. Eventually, I had an accumulation of so much stuff. I realized, like, God, I never bought or I never wore that tank top. It was kind of okay on, but I bought it because it was $5. Those are things that you can work on that you can't just blame God and spirituality on. You live it, or we're in a logical society. Why is it that EMTs, the people who drive the ambulance and can help save lives, why are they only earning $14 to $20 an hour, but yet a tech guy, a 24-year-old tech guy out of college who has no spiritual means is earning bank, and they're the ones that are blowing their money on, alcohol. Maybe they're going to like a strip club or something like that. It's like those two things don't match. So there is logic that goes into where society prioritizes things. The tech industry, they're making bank. All right. If you lived in Seattle and you worked for Boeing and you just happened to be born at that right place at the right time, a lot of people are like, there are a lot of the evangelicals that are like, oh, God, gave me all this money. It's like, no, you were just born in the right place at the right time as compared to somebody else who was born in Cleveland, Ohio, worked at the steel mill, and all that stuff went down the tubes in the 70s and the 80s. So in reality, it's like there is a little bit of logic there. Now, you can, analyze that on a soul perspective, but that's a different topic. A lot of the spiritual community says you don't have to work hard for your money. And I agree with that. And I also say that's BS. Because the people who are the richest or the 1% have worked their tails off to get where they are. Jeff Bezos started in a garage, I think, or maybe that was Steve Jobs. Whatever. All these businesses started off as a little thing in a little box or in a little garage and blew up to be something big. They never sat back at the beginning and just did nothing and made everybody else work. They worked for it. That's the whole point of owning a business. You have to put in 1 to 2 years of quote unquote hard work. And then once things take off, then you can start easing yourself back. And hopefully you can hire a manager or somebody else to run the business while you're earning the profit. That's the same. I work in gyms. That's the same thing that happens. Once the gym becomes profitable, the owner is less involved. You hire a fitness manager or director, general manager, and then they can kind of take care of the day-to-day operations while you can putz around, the community doing whatever and maybe working like 10 training appointments a week. So I just don't think I just think when they say work hard, I really think like the not working hard maybe does come from the internet, or if you make a ton of money off of a website through affiliate marketing and ad clicks, like that's not hard work, but you do have to invest time and energy into that blog. And blogging is quote unquote hard work. It is, it is years before a blog can even make a little bit of money. So I just don't think money falls into our lap. You do have to work for money. That's just the point. So maybe it's more fun to work on a blog rather than, working at Microsoft. But the reality is you still have to put some effort there, unless you come from a family chain where, money and inheritance is just rippling down or people can take care of you. And I don't think, the next point is I just don't think money is just transactional, like tithing. I went to a mega church home, I think, and they reminded you 10% of your income should go to the church. Meanwhile, I looked up the Judah Smith. I looked up their annual revenue report, and they made like $64 million. And a lot of people that go to the church are kind of poor and struggling people. That's why people go to spirituality a lot of times. It's because they're struggling or they're suffering. and they need support from community and from God. And I just don't think just because you tithe, like it's just going to be so transactional that you're going to earn a higher wage or things like that. I don't agree. I know a lot of people who donate a shit ton of money to the animal communities, and they earn like 35, 40,000 a year because they also work with animals. Working in humane societies or with animal welfare, you're not signing up for it for a really large paycheck. You're doing it because you have passion and drive to help the animals. You're not doing it for money. So that's one thing I've learned. It's not just this transaction. Just because you give, you're going to receive. I do believe in giving and receiving should be equal, but I just don't think it's a transaction. Just because you give, you're going to be getting more of it in return. The next point is when I stopped worrying or pushing for money and started focusing on spirit and my relationship with God. That's actually when the money came. I had to laugh about it because I look back at my life, and when I got divorced, I was like, God, you need to help me out. And I just had to start piecemealing stuff together. And I started getting some more higher paying classes, but it took a lot of time, and it took a lot of focus on myself and patience with God to steer me into that right direction. It just didn't come immediately. But I noticed that when I stopped obsessing, things evolved naturally and organically. Now, some of that has to go with your linear progression. Like once you spend 10 to 14 years in an industry, your expectations of getting paid, especially when you have a master's degree, that's going to be different in your 30s as compared in your 20s when you were willing to work at entry-level wages. That's not possible the older you get. The last point that I want to make, because this video is long enough, is that when it came to money, I trust that everything will be taken care of. During that time when my ex-husband left and I was making $1,800 a month, I was freaking out because at the time my rent was just below $1,600. And God, the universe, spirit, whatever, the divine took care of me. I eventually picked myself back up. It took, about 3 to 6 months to really do. But it happened. The universe took care of me. I remember this story before I left for Germany. I was freaking out about money because I've never earned a ton of it. Or I earned a modest wage, like an Ohio wage, but lived in an expensive city like Seattle because I don't, working in fitness or in like community fitness, like nonprofits and governments, like parks and recreation, like you just don't earn a ton of money. You do it because you love it and you want to help people. And I remember, it was like a week or two before my ex was about to move to Germany because he went before me. And I was like, I wish I just had a little bit of extra money that we can go and see this movie before we left because we both loved movies. And I got off the bus and I took a little bit of a different walking route to work. And I looked down at my feet and there was a $20 bill that just kind of flew by my feet. And so I grabbed it. I was like, oh my God, what an amazing blessing from the universe and from God. So I do believe that you do have to build a healthy relationship with money. You can't see it all as evil. You can't see people as evil just because they're in a different industry that makes more than you. It's just the way society prioritizes things. Society right now prioritizes data analytics and tech jobs. Tech is the new Wall Street. Business used to be it, and now it's the tech industry. So I do think you need to build a relationship with it. But I also think that abundance doesn't necessarily mean a ton of money falling into your lap. I've known people who are super negative or they're constantly in negative cycles in their lives. And you know what? They just said, I need a little help. And you know what happened? Within hours, someone dropped off a bag of pet food and a $25 gift card on their front porch. What a great blessing. Abundance starts as small things like this. And eventually, hopefully over time, those small things can accumulate to help you on your life path and journey. But those are things that you should be thankful and grateful for. And it's not just going to be getting out of college and earning bank, because there's a lot of people who do corrupt stuff. Like a lot of these Oxycontin pills that were sold on the black market was created by two young 20-year-old tech guys that used to work for PayPal, and they read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and they wanted to make more money. They wanted to be rich. And so they got into selling painkillers to people whose prescriptions were run out from their doctor. And guess what? They killed people. People died. A 24-year-old died in Seattle from taking these pills because they were also, I think, importing like fentanyl from China. So what contribution did they make to society? They went to the dark side, exploiting people, exploiting pharmaceuticals for their own personal gain. So these are some lessons that I've learned through 15 years of life. And anyways, if you have any thoughts or comments that you want to share, please feel free. Thank you for liking, sharing, and subscribing. See you next time. Bye.